What's up, guys? Welcome back to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Supermicro Computer stock, ticker symbol SMCI, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Wednesday, February 28th. Well, guys, Supermicro Computer SMCI stock down 2.88% today, $25.23 a share. Listen, it is down an additional, 12, 13 points here after hours. But listen, I mean, you guys, if you watch these videos on a regular basis, I am covering SMCI every single day, you'll know that I typically say, and you'll hear me say this a lot, you have to take after hours with a grain of salt. And I say that whether it's in your favor or going against you. I say this when the stock is up 20 points to the upside after hours, right? Volume is so low. I mean, take a look at that. Volume is so ridiculously low, and you get so many of these little candles, these little useless neutral candles, right? That it just gets bullied around. Stocks get moved around so easily after hours that, you have to take it with a grain of salt. I mean, that being said, of course, it is the real price. So would I prefer, if I'm a bull, to have the stock be flat or up after hours? Yeah. But, I mean, again, I can't. The real test is going to be the open the following trading day. So let's take a look here at the name and let's get super contextual, try to pull as much bias as we can out of today's trading day, and take a look at levels that I'm paying extremely close attention to tomorrow's trading day. So let's start here on the 5-minute chart and do our daily volume profile ritual here. You can see that we had kind of this big downside move off the open that then actually recovered, and we consolidated really for the majority of the rest of the day into the close. Let's take a look at the volume on that. We did see, we expect bigger volume on the open. That second 5-minute candle, we saw substantial volume on that big red candle. Bulls, understand that a lot of bears are going to look at that, at least in real time, and think that they're going to say that, okay, we're clearly winning this morning here. However, you can see here that it turned out to be a green candle. However, we had a heavy downside wick on that candle, right, on big volume. That tells me that that was kind of like the reversal candle of the day. Obviously, it was in hindsight. And we had a big battle between the bears and the bulls that not only, contributed to that massive wick that then ended up being the reversal, but also big volume there. Which, especially then when you consider how the stock moved the remainder of the day, to me, it kind of zeroes out all of the morning movement we had and creates kind of a neutral environment as far as the volume profile on the 5-minute is concerned here today on SMCI. So let's move on and take a look at levels, starting with the 30-minute chart. So yesterday, guys, we were talking on this one about how ideally we would see a more definitive claim and really a hold of not only the 200 period, obviously, but the white line, which is the 50 period. And, the stock was unable to hold the 50 period here today. However, it did hold the 200 period during regular trading hours, treating that as, I would say, an increasingly relevant support as the day went on. We have dipped below there in the after hours, but, I mean, do I have to say it again? Please take it with a grain of salt, absolutely, because that volume is just so incredibly low. So, pretty simple here on the 30-minute as we head into tomorrow. Ideally, from a bullish perspective, if we could reclaim both the 200 period and the 50 period, and ideally get up through the white line, which is the 50 period, which would also imply getting up through the gray line, of course, the 200. But get up through the 50, and then honestly, guys, I know that a lot of bulls just want to see this thing go straight up forever, but let's be realistic, right? I would ideally want to see a break upside through, and then a pullback retest of the 50, and then an aggressive high volume rip higher. That would be a beautiful sign as a bull. Bears, really simple here. You just want to hold this after hours move below, obviously, both the 50, but especially that 200, and then fade lower, of course. Now, the 4-hour chart. This one is incredibly in play as well. You can see that we're right around that 50 period. We did give it up today in regular trading hours, okay? So on the 4-hour, you can see here that we're, of course, below 850. We'll get to the round numbers on the daily. But bulls, you can see that 50 period is right around 860, 860, 70, around there. It would not surprise me tomorrow to see a retest of this levels. Given that scenario, bears, any retest of that 860, or depending on where that is in the morning, we could move a little bit higher to 861, 862 on that 50 period here on the 4-hour chart. Any retest bears, you're going to want to see a hard and as clean as possible rejection on as much volume as possible. Okay, bulls, get back up through that level. And again, similar to like the 30-minute chart, I know we would love to just see it rip higher, and that would be great, but I think the even more healthy scenario would be rip upside through on a lot of volume, pull back on ideally low to moderate volume, okay, and then rip higher on high volume, as much volume as possible. That would show me that a big sample size of the market agrees that, okay, we've reclaimed now the 50 period, especially, specifically on the 4 hour. But remember, each of these time frames is just its own factor in like the bigger spectacle of things here, which is going to bring us here to what I think is the most contextual chart of all, as far as from a psychological standpoint, which is always going to be the daily. Okay, this has by far the most eyeballs, and it paints by far the clearest picture of what we're looking at on the stock. Like, you guys will hear me say this a lot as well. On the daily chart especially, because it just has so many eyeballs and it's such a common chart to look at, I only want to look at the story, the psychological TA story day to day, that you would be given if you walked up to anyone on the street with a basic understanding of stock charts and said, what's the story here? What they tell you, at least in most cases, is what I would want to be paying attention to. The obvious story on the daily is the story I want to look at, okay? Because that's the one that's going to have the most eyeballs, and funds and institutions, they think that same way. So what's the obvious story here? Well, there's not a moving average in sight. I mean, the nearest one is the 50-day down at 506, so I'm not even paying attention to that. Here on the daily, what I'm paying attention to are psychological round numbers, the ones that we've been talking about. Now, listen, yeah, we're at about 850. We closed at 851. We're a little lower in after hours, whatever. The truth is, on SMCI, the stock has been so volatile that I think as time goes on, if we see things calm down, those $50 regions, those $50 round numbers increments, are going to become more relevant. But, right now, I'm primarily looking at the $100 round number increments as the big psychological level. So yes, of course, I'd love to see 850 hold, but that's kind of obvious from a bullish perspective, right? Truthfully, I'm looking at 800, 900, and 1,000, because 800 is, I mean, I don't know about you, but if I were looking at SMCI, incredibly bullish, the last thing I would want to see in the near term is a downside break of 8. Because that is a relatively obvious level. We've seen it respected on 3 or 4 trading days on both sides of the ball, which beefs up that level in terms of importance, at least in my head. 1,000 is obvious, right? Not only has it been like a double or triple top in the stock, but it's also the obvious psychological level that everyone is paying attention to if we get, up toward approaching that. And then 900 is just the $100 round number, of course, in between. And that's, of course, going to be relevant as well. So from a day-to-day perspective, bulls, the enemy right now, what I would not want to see, and we would cross that bridge if we got there, but what I wouldn't want to see is a downside break of 8. What I would be thrilled about as a bull is a close above 9, because that could potentially open up some opportunity to use 9 as like a trampoline, a FOMO trampoline, to get up and make another honest test of 1,000. All right, now bears. You don't want to give up that trampoline. So obviously any test of 900, reject hard on as much volume as possible. But really the ultimate, I think, objective here in the near term for the bears from a day-to-day perspective, because we have to talk about all these levels day-to-day, because we know what SMCI can do and has done in the recent past in terms of intraday volatility, right? It can make some big moves. The ultimate goal for a bear is not really to break 850, it's to break 8. So yeah, a break of 850 is a good start, but if I'm bearish looking at SMCI, getting down in the 7s to me would be a big deal. The name of the game on both sides is to discourage the other side. So put yourself in the head of the enemy, so to speak, and think, what would discourage me the most if I were positioned to the exact opposite of what I'm currently positioned? And then that's what you're kind of looking for, to give yourself that satisfaction or reinforcement. Now, implied volatility, just based on, compared to like the last month and a half, 2 months, it is in the mid-range. So, listen, I'm looking at implied volatility. If it's very high or very low, I'm paying extremely close attention to it. Again, just understand the higher IV goes compared to your relevant or more so intended trade time frame, the higher the risk of potential IV crush. The lower that goes, the more, I would say, attractive the stock becomes for options buyers looking to purchase new contracts. Of course, because when you buy contracts, when you have IV go up, and if you buy when it's very low, you'd be looking for a return to equilibrium on implied volatility. Of course, also looking to be directionally correct in the underlying, the stock. That benefits you when you buy options. IV going up is good when you purchased the options. Now, what was the bias, speaking of options, in the chain here today? Decent sample size, about 153,000 total contracts traded, 82,866 calls, 69,961 puts here today. Not overwhelming, but a slight call side bias here. Short-term speculators, these are the bets that are on average going to have a much shorter expiration. The far out of the money, cheapy, gambly style speculative contracts, the 0 to 20 delta range. 44,000, about 600 puts. Sorry, 44,000, about 600 calls, and 38,500 puts. Now you have to be careful on SMCI, because you start going lower and lower, and the volume also goes lower and lower. I mean, when you get down to 1,200 contracts, it can be so thrown off by one buyer. So I like to look at, on a stock like this, yes, the short term has the most volume, so we can take that data. It starts to flip to the put side once we go to 21 to 40 delta range. It flips back to the call side at the money contracts, and then the volume just gets so low that, you know, as much as I'd like to say, yeah, it's leaning to the call side, it's too low, right? We have to stay unbiased here. And while not overwhelmingly so, the overall call put ratio is call heavy today as we head into tomorrow, Wednesday. Now, listen here, I'm doing the same thing on the Nvidia and the Tesla videos today. I am so curious about SMCI though. What is your position and your time frame? You don't have to get specific. I'm just curious, like, do you own long shares? Are you short shares? Do you own calls, puts? Are you utilizing option spreads? What is your objective? And more importantly, what's your time frame? I'm trying to get a gauge of, as a community here, I think it's a good opportunity to get some insight. Are you guys buying SMCI for a swing? Are you looking at this as a momentum stock? Or are you buying this as an active investment and plan to hold SMCI for the next 25 years? It's incredibly different mindset. I'm very curious to hear. So let me know in the comment section down below. If you got value out of this video, please, on the way, subscribe to the channel. I'm covering SMCI every single day, and I'll see you in the next one.